Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Quest Connect. It's the first Sunday of the month. It's nearly 2 o'clock, and that's when we hold Quest Connect. So, my name's Allison Boyle, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of the facilitators at Quest for Life. Today, the title of today's talk, how we're going to spend our time together, is Beliefs Matter. And, have you ever wondered about some of the historical beliefs that you hold, particularly the ones about yourself? Of course, they're the most interesting, aren't they? Do you ever wonder where those beliefs come from? Do you even have awareness about some of the very automatic beliefs you hold, again, particularly about yourself, and how they might influence your decisions, how they might influence your behaviour? And a really juicy question that we might think about is also, do we need to keep on believing some of these habitual beliefs that we hold? So that's the territory that we're going to explore today. And we're also going to look at how we can get some awareness around some of these beliefs, because remember, when we have awareness, we have more choice, and that can feel a bit more freeing rather than just operating out of automatic pilot. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. It's absolutely a joy to be with you on this Sunday afternoon. And if perhaps when someone, oh great, Geraldine, you're there, that's great. Geraldine from Melbourne, so I'm assuming that you can hear me and see me, Geraldine. It's always lovely to know that you've got a little bit of company. And also welcome to those who join us a bit later on. So let's start, like we always do, by coming to our senses. This little practice that just helps us to focus, that helps us to kind of drop everything that we've been doing up until now and just come into the present moment through awareness of our senses in the body, because the body's always in the present. And this also just allows other people to join in as well and catch up with us. So if it feels okay for you, close your eyes or lower your gaze. I mean, you don't have to, you can keep your eyes open and just make sure you're comfortable, that's all. And let's just start by taking maybe 3 conscious breaths. Oh, and for me, I always sort of maybe just exaggerate the exhalation. Because for me, there's probably been a little bit of stress just getting online and hoping that the connections work okay. So I like to just arrive by kind of letting all that go. Just 3 conscious breaths in whatever way feels natural to you. And let's start by taking our awareness to our sense of touch. We might feel the clothing that's against our skin. We might feel our feet on the floor or inside our slippers or shoes. We might feel our back supported by a chair. We might notice what our hands are touching. We might notice temperature. And now we can shift our awareness to any sensations that are in the mouth. Maybe there's the taste of that last cup of tea or coffee. Maybe we can also notice any aromas that are in the air. As we shift our awareness, to anything we can see, even if our eyes are closed. There's often squiggles or colour, light, dark. And just taking this time just to be, not to do. Letting go of everything that's gone before. Just focusing on what you can see. Then taking your awareness to your hearing. Maybe there's sounds close by. There might be sounds that you can hear in your own body, your breathing, tummy rumbling, sounds in the room, sounds outside the room. Not needing to label the sounds, just receiving them. Maybe you want to play with picking up one sound, letting it go, and then finding another one. Just letting the sound come to you. Perhaps letting your hearing run right out of the room, right out of the suburb. Maybe there's a silence that exists beyond all the sound, beyond all the chatter. Just be with that. And back to your breath. Just noticing the rise and fall of your belly as you breathe. Noticing where you experience the breath. Not needing to change it. Just noticing. And then when you're ready, just bring your awareness back into the room. And just notice what you notice. It doesn't need to be better, worse. It doesn't need to be anything in particular. So I noticed there's another couple of people. So thanks to Glyn and Lindell. Lovely to be with you. And today we're going to explore some aspects of our beliefs and why beliefs matter. In fact, beliefs matter so much that Patria, our founder and CEO of Quest for Life, when she wrote her book, Your Life Matters, she dedicated all of chapter 5 to beliefs, and she actually called it Beliefs Matter. So I thought what we might do, just to start, I thought I might read you 3 quotes that are at the beginning of this chapter, and I also thought I might read just the opening paragraph, just to set the scene and set the tone for our exploration today. I generally read this book about once a year, so I don't know how many years I've been reading it for now, probably 5 or 6, and I get something out of it every time, and this is what prompted me to talk about this today. So a couple of quotes from different people. Your life is a perfect reflection of your beliefs. Andrew Matthews. What you intend in your thoughts with passion, you will act upon and ultimately create. Wayne Dyer. Our goal is not to change the world or even ourselves. Our goal is to change our perceptions about the world and about ourselves. Paul Farini. And then in the opening chapter, Patria says, beliefs, attitudes, values, assumptions, expectations, and judgments are all within our mind. Our mind holds our basic philosophy of how our life should be lived, even how it should unfold. For instance, we might believe that if we're honest and trustworthy, then life will deal with us fairly. If someone treats us badly, we're confronted with our feelings about having that belief challenged. This triggers related feelings from past experiences, and thoughts and feelings this in turn may bring a whole litany of other thoughts and feelings in train. So there'll be a whole litany of other thoughts and feelings that accompany that. When I reread that opening chapter, I was reminded of this very significant episode, and it's a small story really, but it's a significant episode that occurred, and I had to think about it today, 33 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was now either 88 or 89. And I had been living in Australia for 5 years, and at the time I was living in Brisbane, and my mum and her then partner came out on holiday. It was the first time they'd been to Australia. They had kind of started their relationship after I left, and it was the first time my mother had been on the other side of the world. So let's say I imagine that she probably was feeling, a little bit uncertain and a little bit out of sorts, and there was probably a bit of apprehension, etc., etc. She was certainly out of her usual environment. And we had a lovely time, and it all went very well. But this little episode happened within the first couple of days of her being there. And we had gone out one night, we'd gone to a concert, we'd had a lovely time. And when we left the concert and we were going back to find our car, it was really, really busy in the centre of Brisbane. Kind of slightly overwhelmingly busy. It may be that there were a few other events on that night, I'm not sure, but it was really busy, and in particular with a lot of young people. And we got to a crossroads and we had to cross the road, and there were certainly a lot of people kind of crowded around us, and we pressed the button and whatever. And at some point, and I don't remember this exactly, but at some point, people just jumped in front of my mum and kind of got to the front of the queue of crossing the road, if you like. And I vividly remember, and I don't really remember the words particularly, all of them, but I remember my mum having this quite overreaction to this, situation. And she started to talk quite loudly and, say a few things. And I can't remember what they were, but I remember that it ending in a statement about, now in our country, meaning in Scotland, look, in our country, we queue, right? And I remember her making this emphatic statement and me thinking, wow, like that was a really pretty strong reaction for just kind of being in this situation. As I say, she was probably a bit anxious and etc., etc. But I was reflecting on this in preparation for today's talk, and I was thinking that, so, in that case, holding a very strong belief about people waiting their turn means that everyone will get their needs met. It's fair, of course it's fair. The trouble is, not everybody shares that view, and not everyone acts from that belief structure. So when our beliefs are challenged, it kind of exposes the more vulnerable parts of ourselves. And I reflected and I was thinking, and I can only imagine this, that my mum was probably brought up in a household where, taking your turn, and especially issues around fairness and justice, were really important in that family. Her father, my grandfather, worked in the steelworks, but he was a trade unionist and he fought, for workers' rights at times where working in the steelworks would have been very, very unsafe. He then became a town councillor and he became a local magistrate. So fairness, justice, the rules, if you like, were very, very important. And I think my mum really looked up to her dad and I think constantly sort of sought his approval in lots of ways. So just that little episode, I think, was very challenging to her, particularly at a time where she herself was probably under a little bit of stress. So when our beliefs are challenged, it can really expose those more vulnerable parts of ourselves. Maybe there's even an old wound from the past that kind of gets exposed. For example, being overlooked. And when this gets triggered in the present, we can become really quite defensive. And in the story I've just told, we may defend by kind of attacking, by using kind of bluster, volume, in order to, keep people away from their more vulnerable parts of herself, when maybe underneath it all, she felt maybe quite insecure in that situation. I can only imagine. It's 30 odd years ago. So let's just take a look at the way our beliefs can get formed, especially those ones that are really, really automatic. So growing up, when we're tiny wee, pre-3, we're born into a family, and all of us need to adapt into our particular circumstance, our particular family. We pick up at a feeling sense what's expected, what's valued, and what we need to do in order to get our needs met. Because, well, when you're 3, you can't leave home, can you? We're dependent for a very, very long time. And we may even begin to kind of take on roles, which is like other people's version of us, depending on what the particular family value. So sometimes it's for the firstborn being responsible. I was the firstborn. In fact, I was the only one. So I think feeling responsible, began and ended with me. It might be being the responsible one. It might be being the smart one if academia is valued. It might be being the funny one, the musical one, the quiet one, the sporty one. We pick up at an intuitive, at a feeling level, that which is valued. And we adapt to where we find ourselves. And of course, in some families, maybe it's even safer, not to have needs, not to speak up. And of course, it can happen in the inverse. If maybe you're, I don't know, the baby of the family, or you're the middle child, and you know that academia is valued, and maybe your big brother or big sister really, pretty smart and, get the good marks, and maybe you just don't feel as though you can cut it, or you're not interested, it's not where your interests lie, then maybe you actively kind of dumb down a bit. Maybe you think it's no point in trying because I'll never be as good as them. Because the other thing that happens as we're grown up is we get compared. I mean, we get compared the minute we're born, our size, our weight, our head circumference, we get compared all the time. And if you're in a family where there are siblings, obviously you're going to get compared and contrasted to those other siblings. And even, there's no ill intent behind this in the best of all possible worlds. It's what we make of it. It's our perceptions. So this goes in very, very young. We also are born into the soup of our family's prejudice, and we find out, who the others are, those who live on the other side of town, those who are from a different religion, who go to a different school, who support a different football team or political team. We hear about the voice of the others, and we get that felt sense that these others are maybe not as good as us in some way. Maybe they're even to be feared, but they're separate. And of course, these judgments do separate us. And think of the judgment my mum used, that separation thing, like in our country, in our country we queue. I mean, we don't always queue in Scotland. I mean, in our country we queue. We are better than you guys because you're just running riot here and no one's taking their turn, right? So there's a judgment that comes with it, probably born out of fear, actually. Then there's the I'll be happy when story as we're grown up. And we learn to postpone our sense of happiness to some future time where things are different to they are now. You'll be happy when you go to school. You'll be happy when you leave school. You'll be happy when you get your own apartment, get a job, get married, when you get money to buy more stuff, whatever it is, when you go on holiday, all of that. So we take on a lot of these beliefs. They go in as a very felt sense by about the time that we're 3. It's very young. And of course, we don't have the words for it, but we get the feeling, don't we? We get that feeling sense. And we come into the world, as these little young, beautiful bundles of joy and just there to be loved and there to give love. And we're wired for connection, and we take on these beliefs, and they've gone in as this felt sense about what we need to do in order to get our needs met. And a lot of it is other people's version of us. Dad and mum want me to be smart. I need to be beautiful because I'm not smart. I need to be funny because I'm not beautiful or smart, in comparison to the others in my family. And, I need to be successful or I'm clumsy. I'm such a failure. I never get it right. My value in life lies in, what I do, not just who I be, So it becomes second nature to us to feel maybe unimportant, to feel responsible, to try hard, to look after everyone else's needs, or to be, overly responsible. So we then have some story kind of going on about some sense of inadequacy in some way that we're not good enough, particularly in comparison. And these form our what we call precognitive conclusions. These are the conclusions we've made before our brain has developed sufficiently to be able to put the pieces of the jigsaw kind of together. And we form these very automatic beliefs that, there's something about me that's different. I'm not good enough. I don't catch on quickly enough. That was one of mine. Okay. And these beliefs may start to just run the show if we are particularly unaware of them. And I'm wondering if this is making sense. And I'm wondering if you're aware of some of the beliefs that you took on from your family of origin. And then, of course, you go to school and there's the influence of that. Then when we get to about 12, our parents actually have less influence. And our peer group, it's all about the peer group when you're, early adolescence. So that informs our beliefs too. It's not a case of set and forget. But those very young beliefs are often the ones that we don't have that full access to. Why do I keep believing this? Where does this come from? Because it might have gone in really, really young. And imagine if we let go of some of these unquestioned second nature beliefs, Imagine if I didn't have to be responsible for everything in my own mind. All the places where we feel not good enough, different, separate. If we let go of the judgments, the expectations, if we got back to that first nature, that essential nature that we were born with before we took all this on, that purity, that love that we were born with, imagine that. So if we could bring awareness to some of these automatic beliefs, then perhaps we can actually influence what we think and what we feel. Maybe then there becomes a little bit of time to pause, reflect, and ask ourselves, is this true? Do I really need to keep on believing this? Is this true? And we'll talk about it later, but this is where, meditation can be quite useful, because when we sit to meditate and everything goes quiet, we get to see the dog's breakfast that it is up there. but we get to see the thoughts, the beliefs, and the patterns of our thoughts. And then we start to notice, God, that's really familiar. That's, that when I quieten the mind, there's this kind of, tone there of agitation that I need to be doing something else, or these automatic thoughts about this, that, and the next thing. And we can see patterns. And once we see it, we have a little bit more choice. So at Quest, we talk about, ways of developing awareness about our beliefs. And one of the things we do is we use the metaphor, if you like, of a volcano to raise our awareness about some of our automatic second nature feelings and beliefs. Because remember, we were feeling beings first, and then we had to make up beliefs to explain to ourselves why this was so. So on the board, I think I've got it now. So on the board, we draw this picture of a volcano. And we ask people to reflect or answer the question, as a child, I felt. What were some of the feelings that you had as a child that were particularly challenging? Now, we know that there was a whole range of feelings that you had that were, positive and lovely. But what were some of the feelings that were a little bit more challenging? And we develop a list and we put them inside the volcano. And these become our primary feelings, the feelings inside the volcano. And to be honest with you, the list is nearly always virtually the same. The list is usually contains things like anxious, fearful, not good enough, responsible, ugly, fat, stupid, uncertain, unloved, and on it goes. And having worked at Quest now as a facilitator for, maybe about 4 years or so, I can say it's fairly universal that the feelings inside the volcano represent some type of kind of inadequacy, not good enough feelings. And remember, we were feeling beings first. Then we had to make up a belief to explain to ourselves why this was so. It's because I'm different. It's because I'm not good enough. And we then foist these beliefs onto the world. They're unquestioned. These are our precognitive conclusions. I'll never measure up. My value lies in what I do, not just who I am. No one really loves me. Nobody understands. You can't trust life. Life isn't fair. I don't catch on that quickly. I'll get found out. Blah, 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 blah. And we foist these beliefs onto the world. And then we experience the world through the filter of these beliefs. There's even a part of our brain, our reticular activating system, a more primitive part of the brain, that brings to us that which we are interested in. It's like a little antenna. So it brings to us, if I keep, holding on to the belief of I'm always left out, I'll find every place where I'm left out. I'll find the evidence for it because my radar's up, to look for it. And you can imagine how, if left unchecked, these beliefs can end up running the show. And of course, it can influence, who we hang out with. It can influence the partner that we have, the relationship we have. If I've got a belief that I am fundamentally unlovable, who might I attract? If I fundamentally believe that I'm responsible and responsible for everything and everyone, what sort of career might I choose? You know? So it influences everything. And just thinking about career, I was a nurse for many, many years. And in thinking about how I became a nurse, I grew up as an only child, and my mum was a nurse, and she had a career as a nurse. She was in charge of, she ended up being in charge of 5 hospitals in Glasgow. But even when I was young, she was great. And when I was wee, people used to say, "Oh, are you going to be a nurse like your mum and your granny?" My granny was a nurse too, and I used to say, "No, no, no, I'm not." And I was never pushed. It was never even suggested to me by my mum or my granny that I should take up nursing. It wasn't. But these were really powerful role models in my family. And my mum had a career out of it. And she also valued things like efficiency, being organized. You have to be efficient. You have to be competent. You have to be organized as a nurse. Of course you do. And often that kind of spilled out into home as well. Not that that's a bad thing, but I often picked up that because I was just tiny wee, that it didn't seem to be no matter what I did, I didn't get it quite right. I wasn't as efficient as my mum. I didn't quite get it right. I couldn't quite do the housework quick enough, or couldn't quite get it right, whatever. And then when I was about 14, my dad had an industrial accident and some shelving fell on him at work, and he fractured his pelvis. And in those days, you stayed in hospital for about 10 weeks, 3 months when you fractured your pelvis. So I was obviously going to visit him every day. And I literally remember the day that I would watch the nurses coming in and out, doing what they wanted to do. And I literally remember the day that I made a decision that I was going to be a nurse. And there was always an assumption made that, it was because you were caring, and because, they had been caring for my dad and I wanted to do that and blah, blah, blah. But you know what it was really? It actually didn't have that much to do with caring, but it had a lot to do with watching those nurses coming in and out and looking really, really efficient and looking competent and looking as though they had it all together. And actually, it was that I was picking up on, because that mirrored what I experienced at home. And I really wanted to be like that. I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel particularly competent or efficient, but I knew that was what was, my perception was that's what was valued. And so I thought this was the way to achieve it. And maybe in some respects, that's been true. So these underlying beliefs that are kind of running the show can influence absolutely everything. But back to our volcano. As we said, these are our primary feelings, our vulnerable bits, these tricky feelings that we experienced when we were young people. Then as adults, when people come close to those more vulnerable parts that sometimes we don't even know how to be with, we tend to either explode, out with the volcano, using our size, our volume, our bluster, our anger, our rage, pushing people away, or we implode, where often we might heap judgment, criticism on ourselves. And often the implosion is like a heavy blanket pushing down all those difficult, challenging feelings that, we don't know how to be with. And pushing those down takes a huge amount of energy, psychic energy, that's then not available for other things. So it kind of becomes like a blanket, a heavy weighted blanket of depression, really. Those feelings, when they persist, are depressing. So we can explode, a little bit like my mum did in Brisbane, or we can implode, heaping judgment, criticism on ourselves. Oh God, this always happens to me. If only I had left 5 minutes sooner. If only I'd studied harder, or if only I'd tried harder. Well, this is just inevitable because I'm stupid anyway, and blah, 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 blah. The other thing that can happen, of course, in volcanoes is we can do a little bit of a sideways. You know how volcanoes have those fissures, to let the steam out the side? This can be our sideways anger, our passive aggressive behavior, our sarcasm. When maybe sometimes we don't know how to express ourselves directly, we might, rather than holding someone else accountable, we might be passive aggressive. Rather than saying what we need, we might be passive aggressive or sarcastic. I may have told this story before. It's quite a famous one I tell down at Quest, but one night I was cooking something and we'd run out of milk, and my husband offered to go to the supermarket just down the road for some milk, and he's away for ages. And he comes back and he's got a whole big bag, and in those bags are a whole lot of things that actually we didn't really need because he does get a bit distracted. And I get to the bottom of the bag and there's no milk. And I say, "Shop run out of milk then?" in that tone. And rather than just sort of, dealing with it directly, or even dealing with my disappointment or annoyance that he'd forgotten about, it comes out in a barb. And that was a bit of a pattern for me until one day he really called me on it and said, when you do that thing with the sarcasm, it's really humiliating. And why would I want to do that to someone I love? So that was brought to my awareness. And since then, I've tried to do that very, very differently, as you can imagine. But that's sometimes how our anger seethes, out the side of our volcano. So anger towards others or ourselves is a secondary feeling, whereas the feelings in the volcano are our primary feelings, the bits that we want to fiercely protect. These old wounds are often, out of our awareness, and we can act out of all proportion to a situation in the present, and then, have a little mini tantrum. How old do we feel when we have a tantrum? There are little people feelings. So we need awareness to recognize that we're reacting from these primary feelings, these old wounds, these things that have gone in when we were very, very young, and choose a more skillful adult response. It also takes courage, doesn't it? It takes a lot of courage to notice when we've reacted, and reacted out of all proportion, particularly if we do have a little bit of a tantrum. We can often feel embarrassed or ashamed when we've acted unskillfully, particularly towards others. So the idea is to use these overreactions as an opportunity for learning. But if we're then just beating ourselves up because we've had the reaction, we've probably lost the opportunity. So the idea is to notice our reactions, but with it bring some curiosity. Wow, that's interesting. That was a huge overreaction. And compassion. Wow, I'm struggling here. That I really let it rip there, or I really heaped judgment and criticism on myself. This is a moment of struggle. How human of me. And given that I've noticed that I'm struggling and I'm having a hard time, how can I comfort myself? And what might I need in this particular moment that might help? Then after we've settled ourselves a bit, maybe then we can come back and investigate, wonder what that was all about, bring more curiosity, rather than the harsh judgment. What's going on here? This seems to be a pattern, me with my sarcasm. This seems to be a pattern. What's going on here? Or I've noticed this pattern in my thinking about the multiple different ways that I'm not good enough. What on earth is going on here? And is this really true? Because, as I say, given that, we've run these programs at Quest for so many years and thousands of people have been through them, and in every program, it seems to be universal that we all struggle with these, feelings and associated beliefs about our, inadequacies. you know, what's going on here? I mean, it can't possibly be true. So the invitation is to notice, and my suggestion would be to start off with smaller reactions, not the really big ones. And just notice the reaction you have to somebody jumping in front of you in the supermarket queue, the reaction you have to somebody taking a car park spot, someone eating the last bit of bread that you had your eye on, whatever it might be. The relatively small things, but that you sometimes have this disproportionate reaction to, that's kind of a pattern. And bring your awareness and curiosity. Notice it. Notice where you feel it in the body. That's always a good indicator. So remember that, first come the feelings. We're feeling beings before we're thinking beings. Then we have thoughts. The thoughts over and over again become beliefs. Our beliefs then manifest in our behaviours. Our behaviours have consequences, and those consequences often bring us straight back to beliefs. So, how can we gain some awareness around this? Well, I think we've said many times that, we often gain awareness through our bodily sensations. We can notice the start of a reaction, sometimes by our breathing speeding up, our heart kind of racing, our muscles tense, ready for action, the words that come out of our mouths in the heat of the moment that we maybe later regret, or the things that we don't say, when sometimes maybe we really need to speak up and we don't. That's another reaction too. So we can notice these things in our body and take time to notice. Create that pause. That's why breathing's so important. But the other way that we can develop our awareness is through our language. And there's a language of reactivity. And we often say at Quest, try not to let these words come out your mouth other than with full conscious awareness. It's not to say that these words are wrong, but just with full conscious awareness. So the first one is, I can't. I can't have that conversation with my father, my doctor, my boss. I can't. How old do I sound when I say that? I sound like a little girl, don't I? I sound like, a scared kind of 60-year-old, other than, the 61-year-old that I am. So, not to reinforce that powerless child, we might change I can't to I choose to. I choose not to. I've decided to. I've decided not to. I will or I won't, but not I can't. And if I choose to have that conversation with my boss, my doctor, my father, whatever, what do I need to do in order to stay in the adult part of myself, so that I'm taking care of the 6-year-old who's scared, because maybe, just for example, maybe when I was 6, anybody who was an authority figure was really scary. So, I need to look after that little 6-year-old who's still a bit scared, but I'm not taking her into the conversation with me. All right. And I'm going to try and take the adult part. So how can I prepare? Well, maybe I rehearse what I've got to say. Maybe I write it down. Maybe I make it time limited. Maybe I just stick to the one kind of thorny issue rather than loading in issues from the past. Maybe I can get support from a friend, have my friend on speed dial so we can talk about it later. What do I need? The other one is I should. And should has a few cousins. I should, ought, must, have to, or shouldn't as well. And when we think about should, where do you think that comes from? You really should eat up all your dinner. You really should do your homework first. You really shouldn't do X, Y, Z. And of course, when we were tiny, our parents had to correct us, for issues around safety and in order to learn how to cooperate and be with other people in the world. So, of course, we were told multiple things that we should and shouldn't do. But often then, when we've internalized that, external authority figure, we start to hear our own voice telling us all the things we should be doing, all the things we shouldn't be doing. And often it can be linked to what's good and what's not good. It's good to eat your vegetables. It's not good to eat sugar. It's good to exercise. It's not good to laze around in the lounge. We have these kind of all these judgments that go with it as well. So we often say stop shooting on yourself. We say that at Quest. And maybe we can change should to could. I could go out and exercise, but I'm actually choosing right now to stay at home and watch an hour of Netflix. It's a conscious decision that I'm making. Yeah. Should someone else's kind of version of you, if you like. And I know for me, when I became more aware of the shoulds and started working on dropping them, what I noticed, what came into my awareness was how often I should on other people. So I sort of, limited it for myself a little bit, but then I was sort of projecting it onto others. You really shouldn't X, Y, and Z. You really should, blah, blah, blah. And if you love giving advice as much as I do, it was really hard to change that. And it's a work in progress. So I hope that this is resonating with you. The next one is I'll try. We often use try when we have issues around commitment, when we're kind of leaving the back door open for a better offer, or we want to protect others from disappointment, So it's kind of like do it or not. Thanks for asking me, but I'm fully committed right now. I'd love to say yes, but I'll have to say no. Now, if you combine this with someone who may feel very responsible and who has a belief that really their role is just to fit in with others and take care of others, and taking care of others can also be psychologically, not to disappoint others so that others don't experience disappointment. And so we constantly say yes, when in fact every bone in our body is screaming no. So to get your words around, I'd love to say yes, but I'm fully committed right now, that is a big ask. And the first time you do it can feel really, really scary. So again, the idea is not to do it with something that's hugely high stakes for the first time. Just do it with something that's, not quite so scary. Practice on something really low key. A friend asking you for coffee. I'd love to say yes, but I'm fully committed on that day. I'll have to say no. Could we rearrange? And remember, it doesn't have to be black and white. The first time I heard my husband on the telephone to someone saying, oh, right, that's, yeah, look, that sounds good. Let me give it some thought. It's like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I feel as though I have to give the answer straight away. Let me give it some thought. Buy yourself time. Really, really useful strategy. It's another way of creating the pause moment. And when you create the pause moment, you settle yourself down and you allow yourself a little bit of time to reflect, then you can really ask yourself, okay, What's possible here? I really don't want to go to that family function. I mean, I really don't. Even though for years I've always done it. So maybe, rather than just saying an outright no, maybe I will go, but I'll just go for coffee later on. And then we have to be prepared for all the hooks. Oh, but you always come, you always bring your pumpkin pie. You know, so and so's coming from whoop whoop. You know, they'll be so disappointed. Everyone, or the judgment, everyone else is coming. You know? So you have to be prepared for that. So start small. Start really, really small. And build up to the big ones. Okay. And also remember that every time we say yes habitually, when every cell in our body is screaming no, what's that doing to every cell in our body? That's a stress response. That's an internal conflict. And yeah, that can have its own consequences health-wise. Never always is the next one. So yeah, never always is generally fairly inflammatory. It is loading in issues from the past, and it usually ends in a particular script. You never empty the dishwasher. I did so. I emptied it last week. Well, apart from last week, look, you never do it. Well, I do it, you know. So you start on this whole script that's often very, very familiar and isn't really dealing with the real issue either. The real issue might be something about respect or division of labour or whatever the issue might be, but usually this one generalisation usually isn't it. But try and use and where possible. We've all experienced, look, agree with everything you have to say, but, and however can be used in the same way, you know. Okay, I hear what you're saying, however, you know, with the tone. So try and use and, not but. Look, I've heard what you've got to say, and I'm wondering if you've considered this perspective. I've listened to everything you've had to say, and I'm wondering if it's possible for you to listen to me now. If only is about, you know, rewriting history. If only I'd left 5 minutes later, if only I'd got that degree, if only I'd bought property back in 1975, if only blah, blah, blah. It's rewriting history. It's, you know, really about issues of control, isn't it? You know, trying to control something that's already gone. And it's not dealing with the reality of what is and what is right now. And then, of course, if we believe that something is impossible, it probably is. It probably absolutely is. But maybe with love, that love of our first nature, maybe with love, all things might be possible. So again, just to summarise, first come feelings, then thoughts, then beliefs. The beliefs get manifested in behaviour. Behaviour has consequences, and that takes us back to feelings. So just before we finish, I want to just name something else that's in part of this mix about beliefs, and it involves kind of issues around comparison. And I listened to an interview just honestly 20 minutes before I came online today. So I made a few notes because I don't expect myself to remember these key points. But this interview was with a bloke called Ron Siegel, who some of you might have heard. He's professor of psychology at Harvard. He's got an extensive background in mindfulness and compassion, and he's a psychotherapist, and he's just written a book called The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary. Now, I haven't read the book, but he was being interviewed about it. And he talked about this kind of universal experience that we've been discussing today, where here he is, he's in his mid-60s, he's professor at Harvard, He's got a successful marriage. He's had a successful career. He is objectively successful. No doubt about that. And he says, with a touch of humour, he said, you think I'd be pretty secure in that, wouldn't you? I've got years of experience and you think I'd be pretty secure. And he said, and the answer is no. He said, in this fluctuating sense of sort of self-concept, which by and large depends on the last successful achievement and the feedback about that, I said, that's pretty much what drove me to write this latest book. And he talked in a kind of funny and painful way about that fluctuating sense of self that we can all experience, where, something goes really well. So think about maybe a recent moment of success you've had, whether it might be intellectual success, it might just be knowing that you're liked, might be when you felt particularly attractive, and just get a sense of what that felt like, and even when you dip into that experience, what it feels like in your body when you recall it. A moment of success, he called it. Then think about a moment of inadequacy, when you felt left out, exposed, when you didn't perform well, whatever it might be. Now get in touch with that sense in the body. And he talks about it like elation in the first one versus collapse in the second one. He also said, don't worry, you're not going to stay there, because these things fluctuate all the time. But in the moments of inadequacy, it is so extraordinarily painful that we want to avoid it. And in doing so, sometimes, for some people, they become quite addicted to success, because in those moments of success, of course, we get that dopamine hit, that feel-good chemical, and that can become quite addictive. But his point was, neither lasts. And usually, especially the negative, is based on an overemphasis of our self-critical beliefs, which is what we've been talking about today. And of course, the irony is, even knowing that, like he does, Professor of Harvard, he said, even knowing that, it doesn't stop it being painful. It doesn't stop it being painful. And his point was also about the universality of this experience and the ordinariness, even though it's painful, of this experience. What can help? Well, as we've said before, awareness can help, because with awareness, we get a little bit of distance and we might get perspective that we're just ordinarily, just good enough, just because we exist. If we're not so good, we're not so bad either. And what can help is taking in the good. Not ignoring things where we could improve, of course, but taking in the good and really marinating in it and really feeling it when we have those moments of success, and allowing ourselves to feel it and marinate in it, because that builds on future success, but also it provides some challenge to those beliefs that we may hold about ourselves, about how we're not good enough or we never get it right. Well, actually, when we think about it, when we take stock, there's probably huge amounts of things where we have had success, where we have gotten it right, where we have been good enough. Not perfect, we have been good enough. So really take that in. And as we've talked about, bring some self-compassion. Realize when you're in a moment of struggle, realize when you're encountering one of those collapsed, painful times. It won't last forever, but it's here now. Okay, how can I soothe myself? And how can I reach out? And the reaching out, or allowing yourself to maybe be vulnerable enough to talk to a supportive person, a friend, a therapist about these experiences brings someone else's nervous system on board with yours and can help calm and soothe and take away the shame, because shame lies in the secrecy, doesn't it? That feeling of I'm the only one not getting it right. I'm the only one that isn't lovable or not good enough or whatever this particular story is. So to share that and hear someone else say, yeah, God, me too, it drives you mad, doesn't it? Sometimes you can then get a little bit of perspective and a little bit of distance and, of course, a little bit of support. So I just wanted to share that little last thing with you because it just seemed like really coincidental that I listened to that 2 minutes before I came online. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I hope that you've got something out of that exploration. And just in the last minute that's left, maybe we'll just take a moment together just to sort of round it up by maybe just taking a few breaths together. That's one thing that we all share. So perhaps just 3 conscious breaths, however it comes. As you do so, just trust that anything that's been important that you've heard throughout our time together will stay, that it will linger, and you can reflect on it if it's meaningful to you. It's also okay just to let it go. If things didn't resonate, just let it go. And then just follow one breath all the way from the inhalation through the exhalation as you bring yourself back into the room. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. And I hope that you have a peaceful, enjoyable rest of the afternoon. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.